quad I really liked in the first week on feminist theorists, and I think it really kind of set the tone. That I think the writers did a really nice job of hitting a lot of diversity in terms of intellectual interest, in terms of geography, in terms of time period. I felt like that was a very nice, that alongside a quad of dinosaurs. Like, I think that very much was, it set a nice tone for the competition.
This weekend sees the final of the BROW MIMIR competition. We're delighted to have the 4 finalists of the Tier 1 final with us today. We've got Auroni Gupta, Victoria Groce, and Kaarel Silmato, and Daoud Jackson. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me.
For the benefit of people who haven't met you before, and I think what's wonderful about this competition is that we've got people from different sides of the Atlantic. We've got 3 different countries represented. So there's a very good chance that people might know one of you, maybe none of you. So perhaps if we could just hear a little bit about who you are, what you do, and some of your quizzing background before we get going. Should we start with you, Auroni?
Yeah, so I am fairly new to the OQL/MIMIR quizzing community. I really began that during the pandemic, but before that, I've been playing Quiz Bowl, which is kind of a US-based academic trivia format that focuses a lot on highbrow content. I've been playing Quiz Bowl for like 12, 13 years maybe. And so I have a lot of background with academic subjects, and I've made it to a few championships, both with colleges I was attending, and also on kind of open circuit teams. So that's my experience.
Excellent, thank you very much. Victoria, how about you?
Hi, I'm Victoria Groce. I am a scientific editorial assistant in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Basically, I match make papers with people around the world who can review them. I have kind of a peripatetic background as far as quizzing goes. I did do Quiz Bowl back in like elementary school through college. Spent some time not doing any kind of trivia or quizzing at all when my daughter was young. Was trying to work and go back to school and raise a young kid, and that was not happening. I would say I got back into it about 10 years ago, and then started really getting more serious about it about 6 or 7 years ago.
Daoud, how about you?
So I suppose like the main quizzing, there's a lot of quizzing experience at this point in time, but initially I was a student quiz bowler at Oxford for 4 years. And then after that, I started doing GPs and the like. I won a couple of GPs. So I've sort of got experience on both ends of that world that are often contrasted perhaps a little bit too much. And then now, and in the course of the last year, I've run the MIMIR's World Quiz League.
So it must be nice to play rather than administer a MIMIR competition.
Not well, a bit. I think part of the thinking and actually playing was rather than like the setting helps. I know people normally say, oh, I write lots of questions and that helps me think about it that way. But I think actually part of my motivation in playing was just that I'd spent a year writing loads and loads of questions, and I've actually written probably in the realm of like 10 times as many MIMIR sets that I ever actually played at that point. Because we've now written like, it's getting close to 50 or whatever, which is a crazy number. And I think is great. But also I realized that I was not really playing very much. And at that point, it's nice to feel what other people feel. And then you can see the game from that perspective, which is nice from a setting perspective.
Kaarel, how about you?
Hi, I'm Kaarel. I come from Tallinn, Estonia, and I work as an editor for crossword magazines. So basically my job is to solve a lot of crosswords and find mistakes in them. And some other stuff as well, but yeah. I think I started quizzing more seriously about 8 years ago. and this is my rookie season in Mimir format. I'm really glad I found it because I really like it, and I think I'm also very lucky to be in this final because that I didn't expect that.
Congratulations to all of you for making it to the Tier 1 final, because the competition was immense. I mean, over 300 competitors, ridiculously high standard of play. So to make it to the final is really quite something. When you signed up for BROW MIMIR, what did you think? Did you have an idea of how well you might do? Did you think, I can be competitive? Or did you just think, I'm just here for the ride? What were you thinking? Victoria, what were your expectations?
I don't think I would have expected myself to make the finals. Absolutely not. I am very much a generalist. I do consider myself a much better highbrow than lowbrow player, but because I'm focused on things like WQC, I do spend a fair amount of my study time on stuff that does not fit in the purview of this competition. So I hoped and expected to do well, but I don't consider myself a 99th percentile highbrow player. I just don't.
Well, the stats are certainly very compelling in terms of the breadth of your knowledge. We'll get onto that later. But I mean, Kaarel, for you being fairly new to Mimir, so it's not just the highbrow content, but the Mimir game format. What were you thinking going in? And also not being in your first language.
Yeah.
What were you thinking going into it?
I just wanted to try something new, and I mean, it took some time to get used to the format. In the first game, I didn't know that the game was ending. They just said it, now it's done, and I'm, oh, okay. But I'm really surprised to reach the final because, as Victoria said, I am also considering myself as a generalist and not a highbrow specialist. Although I think I'm better in highbrow topics than lowbrow, but not that better. So yeah. Yeah.
Auroni, how about you? Being still relatively young, coming into this, relatively new to the format, steeped in Quiz Bowl though, as he said, did you think that's going to kind of help pay off? But you know, still with a format like Mimir, you never really know what's going to happen, do you?
Right. I thought I would be fairly competitive because a lot of the subject matter that's been covered in highbrow is a lot of overlap with the canon of bowl questions. And I did play regular Mimir and found myself, the difference was night and day between the highbrow and lowbrow questions. So unlike Victoria and Kaarel, I'm very much a highbrow specialist, and I'm really terrible at lowbrow content. So I didn't know I would make it to the finals. I thought I would do fairly well. So I'm very happy to have survived to this stage.
I don't think I had too many expectations. I think it really depended on what the set looked like. I thought I had a lane really in that. On the one hand, I have that experience doing Quiz Bowl, and on the other hand, from doing all sorts of other quiz. So I think that when they were writing it, there was an aim to make it from both of those worlds. And so I thought that having had experience doing both of those, it would probably help. So things like nature don't come up much in Quiz Bowl. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been fairly standard in that regard. So
going through your progress to the finals, were there any particular matches that you think back to now where, you know, it was particularly tight or particularly kind of, you know, an important match for you or a memorable match for you in any way? Kaarel, were there any games that stood out for you apart from that one where you didn't realize you'd won?
Yeah, obviously, like week 2 and week 1, I was a seated player, so I think the games were a little bit easier for me. But then week 3 was a real shock when I got to play against Dylan Minarik and Alan Lynn and George Scratchard. And I didn't know anything about the US quiz bowl players, and I didn't realize how good they really are, because they're like crazy good. And yeah, Dylan just basically, yeah, he didn't destroy me, but yeah, he won me like pretty comfortably. So yeah. And and after the first shock, I won the other games, but the semifinal was, I mean, that was the toughest quiz I've ever played.
Well, we'll come on to the semi-final, because both semi-finals were titanic. Auroni, how about you? Any games, any competitors that were particularly memorable for you?
I think the last 2 games have both been very crazy. So the quarterfinal game where I played against Kaarel, Kaarel had a very, very good set. And I survived making it into second place by 1 point. And in order to get that one, and the margin, I won by the margin of a question that was really hard, and only 2 people converted total.
Okay, tell us what that question was. Go on, we're dying to know.
There was a quad on very hard Russian literature, and there was a question on Nikolai Nekrasov, who is a author I couldn't tell you anything he'd written, but he's in my kind of mind as like a poet from back then. And I just happened to luckily guess him and talk myself out of saying another answer I had in mind. And if I hadn't done that, then I might not be here.
On such small margins, games flip, and one ill-advised bonus attempt can deprive you of a bonus attempt somewhere else, which can be the difference between getting through and not getting through, as I learned in the low BROW MIMIR, to my cost.
I think part of it is just you're calibrating your own sort of ticker as to how hard it's going to be or how the dynamics go. So I lost to Jonathan Elliott in what I think was the 3rd game. And so that put me a bit of a disadvantage going into the next games, where you're like, okay, I actually need to win, rather than like I can just cruise into second and still go through. There's partly that, but partly also I think you just have to watch where you are in the game. I think one thing that happened in that game was in round 5, I was thinking, okay, I'm in an okay bonus position with the flow and stuff. But the way it panned out was just people got their own questions right. I wasn't really counting the questions very well. And so like that's one thing where you're playing at that level. I think you want to be ahead, because the number of bonus chances may well be less than what you're predicting. So if people play well, then I think it's better to be ahead at the start of round 4 or round 5. And then you can be in a nice position of hoping that the other people in the game get all their points and no one catches you, rather than in the sort of negative position of being behind and then cursing when anybody gets anything right. So,
Victoria, how about you? Memorable games, memorable opponents?
So I mean, a couple in the prelims. The first game that I had in the prelims after kind of after they divided it into quartiles. So I think that'd be week 3. I ended up drawing Tim Polly, Thomas Kolesider, and Nick Jensen in the same match, and did win that one. But that game was very, very losable. I mean, I know that Tim ended up 4th and won each of his other games, including when it got to the tier stage. I mean, that was a very difficult minefield to get through. The last game of the prelims was the game where both Sean Webb and I had 15 for 15. And that one really just came down to, in the last round, everybody was tied on bonus attempts. He and I were both tied on bonus attempts. It just came down to the player in front of him didn't drop anything to Sean to get, but the player in front of me did. That was the difference in that match. that would not have made a difference in terms of me making it into tier 1, but it did make a difference for whether Sean made it into tier 1. And then both of my playoff matches came down to 3-way ties. So yeah.
Yeah, so you don't make life easy for yourself at all.
No, well, the quarterfinal match was one of the weirdest score lines I've ever played in a Mimir match, because we had 11 X's and a total of 2 bonuses gotten by any player in the entire game.
Wow.
Basically, everybody knew everything or nobody knew everything. We got through the tiebreaker there. Auroni won the semifinal that we played a beautiful game, if I may say. I thought I was completely sunk going into round 5. I was down by at least 2 points on everybody going into the last round. I knew that I would be getting decent own gets, but I really needed a little bit of help. So I very much lucked out that Evan missed a history question that I could convert. And it just worked out.
Because that was a stacked
very good
semi-final,
comeback,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Evan Lynch, who has been winning tournament after tournament, if he's not winning, he's there in the final and competing across just about every format you can think during lockdown. And then Andrew Fraser, who's from the Quiz League of London, very strong player, very good on sort of classical history and a lot of the highbrow stuff. So it's no wonder, really. I think, was it 15 points for Auroni and 14 for the other 3 of you, which
correct, yeah.
just shows the caliber of the match.
I think I had 16.
I think you had 16. Yeah.
Oh, 16. Sorry, I've done you out of a point already. But yeah, absolutely superb caliber of match. And the 3-way tie then, Victoria, how did that play out? Did you win on the first one, or?
I did. There was a question on the Italian author Elsa Morante that I was able to convert that neither of the other 2 players were able to. So that was the difference there. And
in your semi-final, Kaarel, you also went to a tie-break, didn't you?
Yeah, that was a lost case. I just somehow managed to convert. Going to the last round, I was 3 points behind Matt Jackson. Not the place you want to be. And Daoud was making a perfect game, so that doesn't count, obviously. And then somehow Tracy Merkin answered one of his questions wrong, that I was able to get a bonus point, and then I answered all my questions right. And Matt was the last player, and before his 3 questions, I was leading him with 1 point. Then he answered the first question right. Then he answered the second question right, so he was leading with 1 point, and only 1 question remaining, which was his question, and he somehow missed it, and then Tracy passed it on, and then I got the last word, and then it went to tiebreak, and as well Elsa Morante was the decider. So yeah.
Yes, so that's I mean, it takes quite some nerve as well. In Mimir, to not panic when you're behind is quite an art, because the temptation when you're behind is to snatch at a bonus. But I mean, you just
I was just smiling. I was like, damn, they're like crazy good. I just sit back and relax and just enjoy the game.
And what about you, Daoud?
Yeah, I knew what the last question was going to be for quite a long time. There was a set that was like Lanugo and Fontanelle, and so I knew there were all the sort of words that only get mentioned in that context of newborn babies. I spent ages trying to get like Clostridium out of my head, and my question was the 3rd one in that, which was meconium. And so then I was counting them out, and I knew that one was still to come, and I thought that Matt was probably in trouble if he didn't get that. And then Kaarel got a really good answer in round 5. he got the Khmer King. And so at that point I was like, okay, he's actually sort of picked one up on what I thought he would get. I knew he still had one of those to go. And I thought he'd probably be in trouble with that. But he got it, and that was a really good get. And then I thought Matt was going to be in trouble. So yeah, it was interesting. I think I would have lost the tiebreaker if I'd been in it as well.
We've heard one of the gets that Auroni loved, but were there any other questions that particularly kind of stand out to you, Victoria or Kaarel, that you thought this was a great get or this was a lovely question?
There was a quad I really liked in the first week on feminist theorists, and I think it really kind of set the tone. That I think the writers did a really nice job of hitting a lot of diversity in terms of intellectual interest, in terms of geography, in terms of time period. I felt like that was a very nice, that alongside a quad of dinosaurs. Like I think that very much was it set a nice tone for the competition. Yeah.
Interesting. Kaarel?
For me, I think the most suitable set was the quarterfinal, which I managed to win against Auroni. I also got the most suitable seat, but the Latin American rivers and dams just helped me out, and the really hard Russian literature was also helpful. But Auroni got the Nekrassov, but I think I would have answered the same. And somehow I didn't answer Dal. I knew him, but I just talked myself out of it, and it turned out that nobody in the whole competition answered that question right, but should have gotten one as well.
So that's the one that got away for you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any that got away from them, that they just thought, I zigged rather than zagged?
The the semifinal, the one own question I didn't get was on the portrait of Juan de Pareja, and that's something that even in Quiz Bowl contexts, I always forget that one. So I know a lot of paintings by Velázquez, but that one I always forget the guy's name. So.
I mean, Velázquez was complete blind spot for me. I don't know. Somehow I've just missed Velázquez paintings. I know like some of them, but none of them that came up. So yeah.
Yeah, it was like the second tier of fame for him.
Yeah, so it's not Las Meninas. So it's
yeah.
diving deeper than that.
There was one. I think it was my first question in week 5, and I was playing Matt Jackson, so I knew that I had to get a big score, and I probably had to win based on how it was stacking up. And then I think the very first question I got was like, Potosí in Bolivia is known for mining what material? And I thought it was silver. And then I played some silly game in my head where I was thinking, oh, there's a Potosí in Mexico, which is known for silver mining. And the reason there's a Potosí in Mexico known for silver mining is because there's a Potosí in Bolivia known for silver mining. And then I played some silly game in my head, and I was like, psyched myself out. And normally the time can help you, but that's one thing about the format is you're playing 30 seconds of like chess against yourself, and then eventually, sometimes you have to just flip the board.
A lot of time for a late doubt to come and.
Yeah, there is definitely a case where you can spend too much time thinking about it, or you can just go down the like wrong alley of thinking about it, especially when it's like early in the game and you don't know how hard it's meant to be. I think the first round is actually like really important. The middle of the quiz is normally not that important in a way, because you're sort of just getting the shape of the game. But when you've got the first round, you don't actually know what the shape is, so it's hard to like fit the events into like the context. You might get something wrong and then go, oh wow, that was a terrible mistake. But I think you don't know how bad a mistake it is until later in the game, where you're like, okay, the other questions are meant to be very easy. So I overthought that or underthought that.
We've heard tough semi-finals, tough opponents, brutal questions, which you've all mastered fantastically well. What are you hoping comes up in the final? If you could have your dream quiz in the final, is there a quad that you would absolutely love to see come your way? Victoria?
Let's see. So things I would be happy to come up. Something like, I don't know, stem cell biology, or I suspect music theory would be good for me. I used to work as a pianist and I started college as a piano performance major. So I've done a lot of music theory. I would say something like modern or conceptual art or literature in translation are things that I'm probably stronger, especially if they're kind of outside the Quiz Bowl canon, you know, very contemporary. I expect would be better for me, but you know, who knows?
You never do. Auroni, how about you?
I think Victoria and I share a lot of intellectual interests, so a lot of what she said I would love to have come up. But also, I am a grad student in microbiology. I study HIV, so I'm interested in things like virology and immunology. And a lot of the biology questions that have come up have been fairly kind of easy, a little basic. So a kind of harder quad that touches upon a lot of the stuff I work with every day or read about. So would be
because both of you have done really well. Auroni, these are the stats up to the end of week 6. I don't think the full stats are available, but up to the end of week 6, Auroni, you had 100% correct on the biochemistry topic. Victoria, you're 88%, which shows really, really good strength in those areas. Kaarel, are you hoping for different things?
Yeah, I'm absolutely rubbish in any sort of science, so I won't get these points anyway. So they might as well be hard. And but I think I prefer with questions about some places that like exotic places. I tend to do better when everyone are lost in a deep dark forest, you know, when there's questions about some really obscure African countries and stuff like that.
And the stats bear that out, because you got 90% on human geography, 87% on physical geography. So very, very strong on that side of things. Daoud, how about you?
Probably the history stuff is normally fruitful, but if I'm honest, in a negative way, I think you just want things to be not really hard, but hard enough that everybody can make mistakes. I feel like being at the nexus of different strands, you want the things that are like quite hard, but not brutally hard. You don't want anybody getting all 4 of a set or things like that. So yeah, I think it's just you want to mix and you want to be challenged on different fronts. I'm not so keen on the nonsense geography, the Atlas awful stuff. So try and avoid that if I can.
Yeah, whereas Kaarel wants as much of that as possible. So you're very opposite in that regard. You scored very heavily in physics and maths. So it's interesting that it's history. So you got a humanities subject, and then you got a sciences subject. Very, very strong. Would you say you're a very broad-based quizzer?
Yeah, I think you have to be in this format really, because quite a lot of the time the only like way to win is through like whatever the hard questions are in a given week. And because it's these tournaments are very broad based, I think you find with these league formats where you have people moving up and down and everybody plays the same set across 300 quizzes, you're not going to have every single category has very hard questions in it every week. So if you want to win against very good quizzes, you have to be able to take the chances, as it were, on whatever the category of the week is. I think that's true with MIM as well as this.
What's impressive when I was looking at the stats for all of you is that compared with one another, you've all got areas where you're the strongest, which makes it seem to me a very open competition. Victoria, you've got quite a number in the 80s, but history, mythology and religion, and philosophy and social sciences, you're the best of the group.
That's surprising to me.
Well,
I consider history a weakness, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's with 81, so maybe that's just reflects a general kind of the group's general strength. Auroni, literature, you're the strongest. Music and opera, you're the strongest. And then we talked about biochemistry. And Kaarel, it's the 2 geographies we talked about. And Daoud, physics and maths. So between you, that there are opportunities to be not necessarily musketeering, because I think in the final like this, that's probably unlikely. But those bonuses might be available to you that might make a difference. I'm going to be a little bit naughty, and don't answer if you don't want to. But is there anything you really don't want to come up? Anything where you'd be sat back thinking, oh, well, the other three can feast themselves on that quad because I'm nowhere near it?
I think Kaarel and I are polar opposites, and I really want like a pretty easy geography quad, because that's I think my biggest weakness with highbrow or like academic content.
Physics and quanti social science. Social science, it's not quanti I'm happy with, but something like very quanti economics would not make me happy.
Well, I just hope there's no questions about like US history or English history or...
Yeah, but if there's a quad on Estonian history, you are
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Yeah, I'm pretty fine with that, yeah. But yeah, anything that's like Eastern Europe, I think I might have a slight edge, but yeah, who knows?
Yeah, and we can't know. What will happen when the questions come out and fall and you play the game as you see it. I said it when I was talking to people in the lowbrow preview. I think all any quizzer can really hope for is they do themselves justice in a match, that you get the things you know you should have got, and you can't beat yourself up if you've never heard of something, but that you know, if you get what you should have got, you play as well as you could have done, then that's all you can do. And whether you win or lose off the back of that, then there's nothing else you can do. And so my wish to all of you is that at the end of this weekend, when you have played the match and the dust has settled and the tears have dried, some of joy and some of woe, you'll look back and you'll think, I did the best I could in that match. I did myself justice, and if I was beaten, I was beaten by the better player. So that is my wish to you. Best of luck, all of you, for the final. I will be watching with interest and reporting on it in Quiz Week. So thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, let's say best of luck.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.